I'm Daphne Adams. I've been dowsing since 1985. That's officially dowsing, because I've always had the sense that things go on all the time around you. And my younger daughter had an experience which was very unpleasant overnight, and that caused me to contact somebody I knew who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew a dowser, who came over with a pair of rods. I knew nothing about formal dowsing at all, and doused around the house and around the grounds of the house to see if she could find the source of these happenings. And what really happened was that when she'd finished her dowsing, she said to me, "Do you want to have a go?" To which the answer was always yes from me. And I walked down the pathway and down the very substantial angle that was our garden, and the rods went wild. So I was hooked. And ever since then, I've been involved in dowsing. I do all sorts of dowsing, from finding water, finding lost articles for people, no matter if it's a bunch of keys or a wedding certificate or an animal or a lost person, or a person who's disappeared on purpose, which of course alters things considerably. I don't know how map dowsing started for me. I love animals, and I'm very close to animals, and I get on well with animals with legs. And so therefore, that is natural to me. I am looking for a dog at the moment who's gone missing. I have posted yesterday the map back to the lady and marked on the map where I think she is. And they're going on a search next week, so I keep my fingers crossed firmly. Somebody contacted me a year or 18 months ago. She was in Wales, and she had a dog to whom she was very much attached. And there was a big hill, a slag heap, and the dog was out with somebody else for a walk and disappeared. And she rang me, and I got a picture in my mind, and I just drew a diagonal line on a piece of paper as she was talking to me and put a dot. And I worked out the proportion afterwards, the layout of the ground, if you like. And she called in cave rescue. And so I sent the message back, "I think she's here." And they got straight to her, which was very good for me. But that, of course, doesn't always happen.
Pendulums come in very many forms, and it's quite important to get something that you have a rapport with. You have to have the right feeling for it, and gradually, as you use it, you'll get used to that particular material, and you won't want to use any other. There's nothing wrong with using whatever material you like. Crystals have memory. There's a lot of business about cleaning crystals, but as far as I can understand, you just clean it with intent, with your mind. You don't have to bury it for 9 weeks in salt or sand or whatever. I mean, this thing will clear if you just intend it to be clear. Actually, it's nice to select something, because it is an extension of you eventually. It's nice to have something that you like or that you relate to. My really favourite one is this, and you could use the pendulum you wear, and it's always there and it's always very handy, and it's a particularly favourite one of mine. And I think it's nice to have to use one as a tool that you wear a lot of the time, because you become very attached to it. Some people actually like to use the pendulum for dowsing because it leaves a hand free, so they can run it down on a list of allergies, if you like. But of course you can do that too with a dowsing rod. But once you get used to a pendulum, and then keep on with it, I don't recommend that anybody changes. Once you establish your very positive yes and no, and really can trust it. My favourite tools are these rods, because I do most of my work outside. So what you have to do to establish your yes and no is always bring the rods up to the certs position. Now, the certs position is a comfortable hold, about 15 inches apart, about just slightly higher than your solar plexus, because everything's working from there. And you have to establish what sort of movement these rods will have to indicate a positive yes and no. Absolutely fundamental to dowsing, that you develop the ability of recording a yes and you begin to trust it. That's what dowsing is about. I'm not going to say the right thing to do, because there's no right thing to do with these things. Your particular yes and no will possibly be different from mine. I personally have to have a dynamic. I have to have the rods moving. You can't just stand there waiting for something to happen. You have to have a dynamic on them. So it loosens your body up, and that's the whole thing about dowsing. You loosen your body up and you tighten up your mind. And you concentrate on exactly, and you ask it to show you a yes. Now, my first yes was simply that, with the two together. And my no was quite complicated. It used to do that sort of thing. And after a few months, I started working with one rod to get a yes and no. And mine is very, very simple. I ask a question, and I have the dynamic of movement on one way. And if the rod does not respond at all to my question, it means no. And if it turns like that, it's yes. And it's as simple as that. I'm not saying that's the way to do it. I'm saying that's the way it works for me, and it's the simplest way to work. Now, you will possibly get something else. You might get a no out this way and a yes that way, or whatever. Whatever it is, if you can trust it, that's what you stick with. So mine is yes and no. The thing to do is to practice. Practice is very simple things. You know, is the electric light bulb turned on? Yes. And these sort of very, very simple questions until you get used to the movement of the rod or the pendulum. And then you start doing the slightly unknown ones, like tossing a coin and dowsing whether it's a head or a tail. Now, when you do that, you'll find that you don't get better than the 50-50 of chance to start with, but practice and repeat the practice, and you'll find it goes from 50% to 60 to 65 to 70%, and then you realize that you can start trusting your yes and no. Once you've learned that, and once you've learned the concentration that gives you the capacity to access this information from somewhere other than your logical brain, then you're a dowser.
My name is Sue Brown, and we're here at Hampstead Marshall. This is the studio at North Lodge, and it was really moving here that got me into dowsing, because we acquired an extra bit of land at the top of the hill just by the church, which used to be a deserted medieval village. And this site, it's got two very interesting mounds, and I wanted to know more about them. And because the land is scheduled, it's listed, I couldn't dig, and so I discovered in reading the newspaper about a man called Edward Fawcett, who was chairman of the Garden History Society and helped the National Trust find old garden designs through dowsing. I eventually was able to contact him, and he came and he dowsed both mounds and the area of the DMV, Deserted Medieval Village. He discovered on the DMV tree pits across the hillside, which he said were about 10 paces apart. 3 years later, we had a geophysical survey done of the deserted medieval village area just by the church, and they also came across these tree pits, which were 7 meters apart, metric. And this was the first validation of dowsing that I'd ever had, which was very, very exciting.
Now perhaps we can have a